Welcome to the podcast where we talk about everything hidden in the shadows. This is Megan, and on this episode, I am joined by a very special guest, someone very close to me that is blood related. Well, no, Isaac isn't blood related. That would be very weird. We'd be in... Okay, that started off a bit crazy. I'm sorry. Isaac's not here. We talked about it in the last episode about AI, that he was going to Denver for a work trip. So this was originally supposed to be a solo episode, but things just fell right into place. And I actually have my youngest sister here with me. Her name is Gwen. Thanks for coming on. And she is going to come on here to talk with me a little bit about near-death experiences. So one of the reasons why we chose near-death experiences, and even kind of like last week with the AI, is one of our things that we always ask, especially with ghosts or anything that's paranormal haunted, is why is the soul there, right? Why is the soul still behind? And then two, essentially one of the questions that people in general always ask is, where do we go when we die?
Yeah.
Right? That is a huge thing, whether you're into the paranormal or not. It's kind of curious as to where we go. So the closest thing we can say to that is like obviously research and evidence that we get from researching the paranormal, getting responses from people that unfortunately are stuck here. And then also near-death experiences, because that is the closest thing someone can basically go to the other side and come back. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these stories are insane as to what they've seen, because it correlates to each other, as well as what they experience when they come back. Because some people have actually had their third eye bust wide open.
Yes.
Some people have had their experiences. You know, they started with maybe like some negative experiences in life, and then they had the near-death experience, and they realized that there is something out there. There is something kind of worth fighting for at the end of the tunnel. And so they come back here with a different mindset, whether it is to spread messages about that, because there's been people that have written books about their experiences. And so we thought it was interesting to take on that perspective, because some of the things that Dolores Cannon talks about, even in her works that we've done episodes on, has talked about a little bit of the similarities that people that have had near-death experiences have basically came back this side and talked about, and it's similar. So how do you feel about near-death experiences?
Well, I don't have one myself, but I have a close friend whose mom did.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. I fortunately have not had a near-death experience, I think.
No, I don't think you have.
No, I haven't. Believe it or not, you know, I like to be like, well, I was, because every angsty teenager is like, oh, my life sucks. When you think about it, I kind of avoided a lot of near-death experiences.
Yeah.
My mom's car crash.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I'm actually pretty lucky. I haven't had anything bad happen to me like that.
Me, on the other hand,
Yeah.
I have not. I would say when you talk about, like, if you look into the idea that, say, we're in our vessel, our soul is connected to our vessel by that cord that everybody talks about, right?
The umbilical cord.
The umbilical cord to the ether, I guess. And essentially when you die, that cord gets severed and you float up to wherever, you believe is the afterlife. And, obviously we've talked about it in like dream episodes where they say like you float out, but you're still connected, you know, like all of that.
Astral projecting.
Yes. And so I would say that my cord was breaking, but was never fully severed. Mm-hmm. And I never flatlined, I should say, in any of the experiences that I've had. So one of the experiences I had, and I've talked about it on the episode, not on the episode, but on a episode quite a few times, was when I was 5. I had throat surgery. You didn't know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, they cut my... Okay, so backtracking a little bit. When I was born with hypothyroidism, which is like 1 in 100,000 babies that you're born with it. A lot of people contract it later on in life, but being born with it is rare. Mm-hmm. So basically I had an improper functioning thyroid. And if anybody knows that the thyroid is what controls a lot of the hormones. So yes, it sucks sometimes.
It's very important.
Yeah. And basically on medication for the rest of my life because of it.
Yeah.
So somehow a cyst started growing on my thyroid, and it almost looked like I had an Adam's apple. And that's what cued my family into saying like, hey, something's wrong. What is that? They found out it was a cyst. And the doctor came to my mom and basically said, hey, we can either cut the cyst off or we can take the whole thyroid out. And it's an easier, simpler procedure if we take the whole thing out than if we're trying to cut it. And so she was just like, yeah, that's fine. They just said like she'll be on medication the rest of her life. And it might be a little bit harder to regulate at different areas in her life. Like when she's going through puberty or big hormonal changes, basically. And so my mom was like, yeah, that's fine. So they put me into surgery, and I do not remember a lot of it. And I think when you have like those near-death experiences, you remember, but you don't. Like I remember the experience, but I don't remember the in-between. It's very fuzzy. And so I went through surgery. I was fine. I cannot tell you for the life of me what happened during surgery. Like I don't remember like where I went or whatever, because I was really, really young. My mom was with me the whole time, and my aunt came to stay with me. And basically, my aunt told my mom, go ahead and leave. She's fine. Don't worry about it. Go ahead. Go get some rest. Because she lived, funny enough, where you live right now. That's where she was living. But I sneezed or something, and the stitches flew off my throat. And the incision was clear across my throat. The doctor did do an excellent job, but you can't really see it unless you get really close to my neck. But it looks like my skin is like like it's weird. It looks like someone took one piece and like sewed it together. It's weird.
It's like that's what stitching is.
Yeah.
But very peculiar.
Yeah. But anyways, it popped open, and I started profusely gushing blood from my throat. It was like an open. Yeah. I thank the Lord. Like I don't remember it. I just remember bright lights and the wheeling of the gurney. I remember everyone beside me, and I remember walking with them next to me. Like I was in the hospital gown, like a ghost would be, I guess. And I was walking with my body. Yeah, I was walking with everybody. I could tell you details.
It's such a shame they can't see my facial expressions as you're telling this story, because this is the first time I'm hearing this. Like this is raw action. No.
No.
Raw.
And that's a lot of the times too. Another aspect that people talk about when they talk about near-death experience is seeing yourself. Yeah. Because there was one story where the person was going through surgery and they flatlined while on the surgery table, and they were able to detail information that like what the doctor was talking about.
Yeah.
Was able to refill. And that's the thing is like, you know, people want to there is a medical explanation. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But there's a medical explanation that gets talked about as like the scientific side of it.
Yeah.
But the people that are astral projecting essentially and saying the details, how would they know? They're not awake. They can't. How would they know that?
Because you could blame something like disassociation.
Yeah.
But if you get details right, that would only be able to be known from a certain area of vision. You just say, then it kind of starts to rule that out. Yeah. Because, disassociation is for people that don't know, is a mental illness or disorder that tends to happen with people that are undergoing like extreme stress, depression, So when you start getting into things like that, of course, anyone could be like, oh, it's just a thing in the mind, blah, 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 which not discrediting listen to any psychologist out there. I know we might sound like buffoons, but just hear us out.
Yeah.
Just hear us out. If you are able to remark on certain details that wouldn't be known otherwise, maybe just hear these people out on what they have to say about their crazy experience.
I would think too, like this is probably one of the most bending when it comes to the paranormal of bending the science. Like getting scientists to listen. Like, because, you take haunted places and scientists tend to, oh, that's this or that's that.
And I feel like near death always first draw that conclusion to, mental illness.
Yeah. And I think this is the one thing where they can't because, you know, you
Yeah, like how are you saying certain things correctly? You know?
going back to the personal story. So that was the first kind of thing I had. And funny enough, it's crazy because it seems like the theme of blood loss is all in my near-death experiences. So it happened again when I was...
Oh my God, girl. Oh my...
Yeah, when I... well, you kind of know this. I mean, you...
That's why... this is why she's so tied to the spiritual realm. She's set like a foot in there every 5 years. It's like her second home at this point.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I have been told I have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, which I don't know how to take that. But so I was pregnant with my son. And so the first one happened maybe in the late 90s. And so this one happened in like 2016 is when I had my son. And which is funny if you're into astrology, it's right around the different aspects of the Saturn return. You know how you have like, I think it's like 7, 13, 21, and then 29 is your first Saturn return. And then it goes, but there's like different like quarter things. I forgot the astrological way of describing it. It's supposed to talk about like key points in your life. Funny enough, I've had like the near-death experiences around the key points, the different aspects of Saturn return. So anybody listen to astrology.
Oh, and you're almost on your next one.
I know. I have my actual Saturn return the beginning of next year. So
I got time. So I'm
yeah, I don't know what yeah. Okay. But the second one, so I was giving birth to my son, and obviously it was the first time I was going through giving birth, so I didn't know. Funny enough, everything with blood was not going right, if that makes sense. They couldn't give me fluids. They were busting my veins, essentially. Like the one nurse said, I've never seen this happen before in my entire life. Like your veins are literally blowing every time I stick the IV in. And they were like, are you like dehydrated? And then the doctor was like, no, she seems fine. I don't know what's going on. Eventually they got it. Cause I was at that time praying, like, please, I don't even care that they're sticking me like 20 times. I want cause I got the epidural. And, so, the doctor comes in, I start going into labor, and I don't know what happened. I blame it on the doctor. The doctor was like super unprofessional. Didn't really took her time, and it's like, hello, yeah, I'm trying to, kid is coming out of me. Like I tore bad. Like I got told apparently by surgeons, they've never seen anybody rip like that before in their life. Basically,
must be a compliment.
Yeah, they basically said that they don't understand how, if I didn't have that epidural, because literally I wasn't going to do the epidural, but something, I guess you could call it spirit guides, you could call it intuition, something told me to get it. And so I got it, and they said, yeah, I would have knocked out because of pain. It was that bad. Mm-hmm. The doctor is covered in blood, like just completely covered. The nurses are covered in blood too. They're trying to, I didn't even hold my son too much after. I basically passed him on to Isaac because I could feel myself slipping. Like that's the best way I could describe it, is slipping. Like it felt like I was going in a dream state, but like how they paint it in movies, like how you start seeing the bright light and it's like your body is slipping away. That's what it felt like. And I guess essentially it was like my rope to my body was breaking, but it wasn't fully broken yet. They put the oxygen mask on me, and I felt myself slipping. Like I did not feel like I was in my body. It felt very like in a dream state. And I could feel my body kind of like astral projecting to different areas of the room. Like I could, there was one point where it was very, very quick, where I was like out of my body and I was looking at myself. Then I was across the table, like across from the nurses, and I could see them. And then I was back in myself. And then finally that stopped and I was back in my body essentially. But I started seeing this mist at the very top of the room. It was bright white with almost like diamond accents to it. I was thinking in my head, I was like, all right, this is it. I don't know what's I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. Right. And all I could say was like, help me. Like, I don't know what's happening. And then I heard people that wasn't the nurses, wasn't Isaac, wasn't my grandmother, because my grandmother and my other sister, the middle one, Phyllis, she was in the room. And I was like, this is it. I don't know what's going on. And they were like, no, Megan, listen to my voice. You have to go back. It's not your time. You have to go back. And then I slammed in my body and it was normal. But I had asked, because that was such a prevalent time for me, I had asked psychics that I came in contact with over the years after that. I was like, what happened during that time? Because and they were like, yeah, you almost crossed. You know that, right? Like Mike on our team, when I asked him about it, he was like, yeah, you almost crossed. You know that, right? And if anything, that was a near-death experience for you. Mm-hmm. And that's how he kind of described it to me. It was like my rope was breaking, but it didn't break yet. But yeah, so I never really flatlined, mm-hmm. but I did experience the astral projecting like outside of your body. There is also some, not reports, but some gathering of information basically saying that a lot of people do that too with trauma.
Yeah.
To avoid mm-hmm. certain things and to not be as scarred by it. But yeah, that is mine. That is mine. So the next thing I kind of want to dive into is kind of what people have seen as they've astral projected, because there's tons and tons of stories that are out there, which is crazy. And did you know, I did not know this. Did you know it goes all the way back, like all the way back historically, that near-death experiences have been talked about?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why I thought it was like a recent thing, like a recent phenomena, which that makes you think like, okay, that's actually a real thing if it's all the way back.
Yeah.
People have been experiencing this. So some of the things that people experience when they have near-death experience, and I think it would be depending, and this is more on the lighter side. I'll also talk about like negative experiences that people have had. But one of the things that they have said that they have experienced is something like a tunnel. Traveling through a tunnel or dark space, kind of like not a black hole, but like space.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like swimming.
Yeah. And it's described as like a transition period from one reality to another. Mm-hmm. They've described the tunnel as being filled with light and leading towards a bright source of light, which a lot of people have described as being like you're transcending or like mm-hmm. you're spiritually there at the source.
Yeah.
Another thing is obviously the light, which I kind of talked about. There was a bright light and it was almost like it was accented, like it looked like clouds in light form, but it was translucent with like diamond accent, if that mm-hmm. makes sense. But yeah, so a lot of people have said that they've encountered a bright light and feeling a sense of reunion with a divine or higher power. Symbol of love, warmth, acceptance, and feelings of peace, joy, and comfort. And there's even been some people that have shared their experience and said that they did not want to come back. They did not want to come back because you feel that essentially source.
Yeah.
Some people have seen beings of light, which essentially could be angels. It could mm-hmm. be even depending on the religion of the person, it could be Jesus. I know there was that one story that came out like early 2000s, I think, of that little boy that said he went to heaven and he talked to Jesus and mm-hmm. all that stuff, saw family members, and he came back and was able to tell details that he wouldn't have known. That was another thing. So feeling connection with the spiritual realm, angels, deceased loved ones, or other spiritual entities. Again, feelings of love, comfort, guidance. Then there's been some other people that have gone super far. I feel like there's different levels too of entering into the mm-hmm. and how long you were pronounced dead too. One of the things is a life review. They started getting a glimpse of the life review, which is a chance to reflect on one's life and learn from past experiences. And I'm wondering if that sometimes there's different levels because there's different things that a person has to see. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that spiritualists or people that dive more into the spiritual aspect of everything have talked about is it's almost like to knock you back on the right path. Like if you stray too far. But then I don't know, because like for me with my experiences, I didn't really, granted, I didn't flatline or get to the other side. It did definitely open my mind up to the other side, but it didn't like knock me back on a path. So I guess it's unique, like almost like a case by case, like incident by incident thing.
Yeah, I think it's a much more personal
thing. It might be to knock you back. It may not be.
Perhaps maybe you were just where you needed to be.
Yeah.
Perhaps you didn't have to really reflect that much.
Very true. Described a life review where they, like go through past experiences. And that's the thing is 5-10 minutes over here might be different time on the other side.
Yeah.
We don't know. People have said the life review is been described as being non-judgmental, focused on learning and growth, and accompanied by a sense of understanding, compassion, and forgiveness. So that's what some people brought back. Out-of-body experience, that's what I felt, detachment from the physical world. Also, sensations of peace and love, which we've talked about. Deceased loved ones, seeing deceased loved ones. Yeah. And one episode that I kind of want to do one day is what we've talked about, like nurses and doctors. But I'm kind of curious to go into nurses that deal with hospice, like grandma. And maybe I'll bring her on for that one in particular too, because she did. She has some crazy stories about when people were kind of edging on that mark of like being close to death, but they were able to see, and what she was able to see, she actually was able to encounter family members of the deceased loved ones right before. I'm not of the deceased loved ones, but of the person that was getting ready to die. Right before they were getting ready to die. And that's how she would know that, hey, this person really is going to die soon. So it's kind of crazy. Alternate realities of dimension and dimensions. Obviously, a sense of being welcomed. Purpose of missions that can also come back with the person. Like maybe you come back with a different mindset or mission to accomplish in this life. And a lot of the times the people that go all the way over and get like the information tend to come back with either a different mindset or different goals or a different aspect to their life. I'm noticing from just the stories I've been reading. With the positive, there is also a negative. So there's people that have gone to heaven or gone to another reality that is nothing but pure light and divine. And there's also been people that have gone to the opposite side and it's been dark. And it's almost like it mirrors each other. Like, for instance, instead of feeling the love and the light, people have said it was a void or darkness, a sense of emptiness, darkness or nothingness, feelings of fear, dread, and despair. There's also been, when they get to the other side, a feeling of fear or terror, pending doom, feeling trapped, suffocated, or a sense of being attacked or threatened. And then, of course, like on the opposite end, on the positive side, how you can encounter angelic beings and stuff like that, have encountered negative entities. So anything like weird creatures or frightening lower dimensional beings, demonic things. And then they also, even on the negative aspect, have had a life review, but it's more of the negative or painful experience that they've encountered. So it makes them feel guilt, shame, or regret. I don't really know, but I wonder if it has to do with like when at the time of the near-death experience, if it's what vibration you're vibing at, if that has anything to do with it. Because I don't know, that's just interesting. Because obviously they say like when you die and you're at a lower frequency, which is like the shame, the guilt, the anger, the rage. I think we've talked about it before where like you can feel those things. Everybody feels those things. You have a range of spectrum of feeling those things, but you shouldn't stay stagnant in it.
Yeah. Do not become comfortable in melancholy.
Yeah. And sometimes people have even felt like loneliness, abandonment, betrayal, like all of that stuff. One thing that I was able to find too on the negative side of things, because I was like, okay, what are some of the light beings? That led me to, okay, what are some of the light beings? And it said angels, deceased loved ones, beings of light, anything that has those good vibrations. But then I was like, what are some of the negative ones? And so obviously demonic beings, shadows, and then negative versions of deceased loved ones.
Oh, that's creepy.
So I think yeah, I think
scary.
maybe that's something like on the demonic scale or negative, trying to make you feel fear.
I have a little bit of a theory.
Yeah.
It's just a theory. But do you ever think that with the negative experiences, it could kind of be like Beyond Scared Straight?
It could be, yeah.
Where they are purposely trying to freak you out to put you on a better path.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that because some of the people that said they've gone to hell don't want to go there.
Yeah. And it makes you reflect. And so when you come back, you think, oh, there's serious consequences to my actions.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
And something interesting. So how I mentioned my friend's mom had a negative experience. She got close when she OD'd. And this is a very different story because it actually turned her atheist.
Oh, wow.
She was a diehard Christian and she was trying to, I guess you would say, repent. She was struggling a lot with addiction. She had a lot of trauma, very hard life, dealt with assault her life, and she had horrible upbringing, and she was just struggling. She ended up ODing, and she claims that when she felt herself like die or flatline, break, however you want to say it, when she went to the other side for a second, it was like she dissipated and there was nothing.
Wow.
And when she came back, she became atheist. And I'm not saying to the listeners out there that I agree with this viewpoint. I'm not saying I'm atheist, just putting this out here, an objective thing to make you be like, whoa, it can also be the opposite.
Yeah. And it's crazy because there's sometimes atheists that go and have a near-death experience,
exactly.
And it's the opposite. So it makes you think.
It's personal.
Yeah.
It's very personal.
Very personal. Oh, wow. That story threw me for a loop.
Right?
Yeah, that's crazy. What basically has been said that has happened that people have gotten out of near-death experiences? So one of the things was obviously an increase in spirituality, like we're talking here.
Yeah.
Like the person was a diehard Christian and then turned into an atheist. And then there's atheists that turned into like Christians. And then there's
even you could say like a minor change, like switching from like maybe being Jewish to being Christian.
Yeah.
Or even being Christian and turning to Islam.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be like completely one way or the other. I mean, you could have a minor shift in spirituality.
That's very true. Or even just being more spiritual, like believing there is a divine.
Yeah, you could, or
something,
maybe you were just agnostic and not sure before.
Yeah.
And after you had the experience, you're like, no, this is,
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things, like we said, is a increase in spirituality. And that can even be religious or psychological beliefs. So you could go in there thinking, oh, I don't really have a purpose, whatever. Go have a near-death experience and get a greater sense of purpose or meaning in life. Reduced fear of death. Some people have said that after coming back, they were able to see what the other side is, so they are less fearful of death. And I think that's also maybe something that like is a struggle with people when they die, is having fear of the other side. You don't know what's out there. You don't truly know who's right, who's wrong, what religious is telling the truth. Like, you don't know. And I think increased empathy and compassion. Some people that come back said they felt a sense of oneness and interconnectedness with all things. Priorities. People have gone there and then came back with different interests, or decided that they needed to spend more time with loved ones, or they needed to focus on personal growth and development. Then the other one, heightened intuition or psychic ability. I know we talked about it a little bit before, but one of our members of the Shadow Walker team. His name is Mike. That is why he paranormal investigates. Well, one of the many reasons. But one of the reasons why he even wanted to dive into this is he's always had experiences, but it wasn't really until he basically died on the operating table because he was sick and had to go through surgeries.
This makes me think about what an easy life I've had.
Yeah. Yeah. But he basically saw them cleaning out because it had to do with his stomach region, and saw them cleaning his organs, taking them out and cleaning them. And he said when he came back, one of the things that he really wanted to do, especially with the paranormal, was prove that there is another side. There is something after dying. And he has tons of stories. So maybe one day we'll bring him on here to tell his stories. But he has tons of stories about what he's seen and stuff like that. And then too, there's people that have had kind of like the opposite thing where they went to the other side, they want to be on the other side, and they come back and it's difficult for them to adjust because now they have information on the other side. And a lot of times that's what happens is some people have come back and said like they were given information about life in general. Mm-hmm. And so now I thought I would share some stories. So these are stories that are out in the public. They weren't specifically sent in to us. A majority of these people have turned their stories into books. Mm-hmm. We'll have all the books linked in the episode description. So you guys, if you want to check out and actually maybe get one of the books, you can. So first, there was a person named Eben Alexander who had a near-death experience in 2008 when he fell into a coma due to meningitis. He was a neurosurgeon, and during his near-death experience, he reported traveling through a dark tunnel and encountering a beautiful bright light that he interpreted as the divine. When he recovered, he wrote a best-selling book about his experience called Proof of Heaven. So that's kind of interesting because he is a neurosurgeon, so he would know. Out of everybody, he would know what's going on. And we're going to get to that in a second, where we talk about like the medical aspect of what they say is going on and why you would even have the experience that you would with a near-death experience medically. And then there was another person. Her name is Anita Morjani. She was a cancer survivor who had a near-death experience in 2006. She reported experiencing a state of pure love and connection and a feeling of oneness with all things in the universe. Following her recovery, she wrote a book about her experience called Dying to Be Me. Another woman, her name is Pam Reynolds. She was a musician who underwent a risky brain surgery in 1991 to treat a brain aneurysm. During the surgery, she was announced clinically dead for almost an hour. So an hour here, could you imagine an hour on the other side? She reported a detailed NDE, a near-death experience that included seeing a bright light, encountering deceased loved ones, and traveling through a tunnel. Which is interesting because Dolores Cannon also mentions a tunnel when she was doing her sessions. She also had them when, talked about everything, mentioned a tunnel. Which I think is interesting too, because I've even had things psychically come to me about a tunnel in the afterlife. Mm-hmm. So for my own opinion, I think there is something between life and death that deal with a tunnel. Mm-hmm. But her experience was later studied by researchers at the University of Arizona and was in the book The Light Beyond by Raymond Moody. There was also a guy. His name was Howard Storm. He was a former atheist who had an NDE in 1985 while undergoing emergency surgery. During his experience, he encountered a group of beings who he believed were angels. And he experienced the life review aspect of a near-death experience, which he basically saw how his actions had impacted others, which I find that very, very intense. After recovering from his surgery, he became a Christian minister and wrote a book about his experience called My Descent into Death. Super interesting. And then finally, there was a guy. His name was George Ritchie. He was a soldier who had an NDE about after a bout of pneumonia in 1943. So that's super interesting to also look back, because they all came from different backgrounds, all different types of situations going through. Time periods. During his experience, he reported traveling through a dark tunnel, encountering a being of light who showed him scenes from his life, gave him a message of love and compassion, and then he later wrote a book about his experience called Return from Tomorrow. And that also helped. His book was also one of the ones that also helped kind of the advancements of talking about NDEs.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some. Another one, there was a young boy who had an NDE during emergency surgery in 2003. He reported encountering Jesus and deceased family members and visiting heaven. If you know the movie and the book, Heaven is for Real, that is based off that kid's encounter. So we're not only talking about different aspects of life, different time periods, but different ages as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's super interesting. And like I said, there's also positive ones, there's negative ones. So I thought I would talk also about some negative experiences. So those were more of the positive ones, feeling of light and compassion and everything else. These are some stories that are publicly out there that talk more of the negative aspects of NDEs. So Angie Fenimore attempted suicide in 1991 and had a near-death experience during her attempt. She reported experiencing a sense of darkness and emptiness and encountering negative entities that she interpreted as demons. After recovering, she wrote a book about her experience called Beyond the Darkness, which also talked more about her struggles with depression and suicidal ideation.
I hope.
There was another person named M. Scott Peck, who had an NDE during a medical emergency in the early 1970s. During his experience, he reported encountering a dark void and a feeling of sense and terror. After recovering, he wrote a book about his experience called The Road Less Traveled, in which he just discussed struggles with depression and spiritual awakening. So I think that's interesting that when you think about it, so Angie, she had the suicide attempt, so that was probably the lower vibrations, feeling shame, guilt, whatever. And then same with the M. Scott Peck. Because his book talks about like depression and everything. So, like I said before, the concept of near-death experiences have been mentioned throughout history. And so I thought I would talk a little bit about that and like where it was talked about, because I think that is so crazy, the fact that it's not just in current time that it's been talked about. So one of the places that is talked about is Plato's myth of Ir. In his work, The Republic, which was written about 380 BCE, Plato includes a story about a soldier named Ir, or Ir, who had a near-death experience and returned to life with knowledge of the afterlife. There was also the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is a text from the 8th century CE that describes the process of dying and the experiences that the soul goes through in the afterlife. The text describes a series of stages that the soul goes through, including encounters with peaceful and wrathful deities. And then apparently, which I was not one that obviously studied the Bible very, I would say I was raised Catholic and I believed in some of the stuff. But apparently in the Bible, there were several stories of individuals who had NDEs. One story in particular was the story of Paul in the New Testament, who reported having a vision of having of heaven and hearing unspeakable words during a state of unconsciousness. And then, of course, medieval literature, there's a bunch of reference to it. And then, of course, in modern society today, modern research, we have a lot of experiences and scientists studying NDEs. So, medical explanation of near-death experiences. So apparently in the medical field, it's still not 100% fully understood, but here are some theories that scientists and different people in the scientific world have talked about when it comes to NDEs. And the first one is neurochemical changes in the brain. So they believe during a life-threatening event, the brain releases a variety of chemicals such as endorphins, dopamine, and serotonin, which can affect the brain's functioning and perception. These chemicals can produce a variety of sensations, including feeling of peace, euphoria, or detachment from the body. So the next one is hypoxia. I hope I'm saying that right. Or basically a lack of oxygen to the brain, which is a common condition during cardiac arrest and other life-threatening events. This can cause the brain function to abnormally lead to altered perceptions, hallucinations, or a sense of detachment. Another thing is they believe psychological factors also play a part in people's experiences of NDEs, basically influenced by psychological factors such as prior beliefs about death in the afterlife, cultural or religious expectations, or personal fears and anxieties. These factors can shape the individual's perspectives and interpretation of their experience. And then this I thought was really interesting. Activation of certain brain regions. Some researchers suggest that NDEs may be caused by the activation of certain brain regions of the brain, such as the temporal lobe or the lymphatic system, which are involved in processing emotions and memories. So these are just kind of like looked into. They're not 100%, but medically, that's what they're saying. And then, obviously, on the spiritual side, people that are more not indulgent, but in the spiritual realm, say messages about the afterlife need to be brought back. Also, information about reincarnation. That said person needs to go through a spiritual transformation. And then also divine intervention. And that's why they experience that. Some people too have said that after they've experienced an NDE, they have had weird dreams. And I think that is a very interesting concept, because you think when you have a near-death experience, I don't know this 100%, this is just my opinion, but you're almost severing the cord, right?
Yeah.
Or if not, it is severed and then it gets reattached. How? I'm not sure.
Stitch it back together.
Yeah, essentially. So when you're dreaming, if you go by what, we assume is that you're, above your body with the cord attached. So that would make sense that would probably trigger things that took place during the NDEs. Some examples that have been associated with dreams is there's a couple stories that are out there. One in particular there's a lady named Dana Brinkley who had an NDE during I said lady, but no, it's a guy. I'm sorry. Dana Brinkley had an NDE during a lightning strike in 1975. During his experience, he reported encountering deceased loved ones who gave him messages about his life purpose. After recovering, he began having prophetic dreams and ended up becoming a hospice volunteer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Another person named PMH Atwater had an NDE during a medical emergency in 1977. During her experience, she reported encountering a being of light who gave her insights into the nature of existence. After recovering, she began having vivid dreams and became a researcher and a writer on the topic of NDEs. And then another thing that's super interesting is that not only have people experienced it, but there has been nurses and doctors that have witnessed it. So one doctor in particular, which is Dr. Raymond Moody, was a psychologist and philosopher who coined the term near-death experience. In his book, Life After Death, published in 1975, he has since become a leading researcher and writer on the topics of NDEs and has interviewed hundreds of individuals who had NDEs. He also worked with healthcare professionals to raise awareness of NDEs and their potential impacts for end-of-life care, which is crazy. So he started out as a doctor and a psychologist and a philosopher who essentially coined the term near-death experience.
Yeah. And you know what I find interesting about a lot of this is, have you noticed so many things dealing with the paranormal and just about spirituality and the body in general is so tied to colors?
Yeah.
I heard too that a lot of people, even when they're stuck in a dream state, they always see the colors purple and blue. And it's funny because your crown chakra and your third eye, where they believe that, spirituality kind of, comes in from, that's the colors it's represented by.
Dang.
And these people going to the other side, they all describe it as a white or yellow light. And if you don't know, yellow is usually the color of, in some cultures, it is being grounded, such as Chinese culture. I believe it represents earth and desire and, going forth.
Yeah.
But in Christianity, it's also a very important color. It symbolizes like purity, holiness, and throughout all of these regions, these colors have a lot in common. And it's almost as if color itself is kind of like a spiritual force.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think too, that's one aspect that you think about it. The first thing we learn as kids is color. One of the first thing is color.
I did not know. Fun little tidbit for anyone listening. I found out the reason why colors are so important for children is if you don't show them color at an early age, that's actually how your kids become colorblind.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I am colorblind. And now that I think about it, it makes sense because when you're growing up and you're poor, you always have those beige walls, that popcorn ceiling.
Yeah.
That white popcorn ceiling.
Yeah.
And so, color is very important.
Yeah.
And it ties into a lot of this, they all describe these white, bright lights and, the dreadful negative feelings more so describe like dark, low vibrational colors.
Yeah. And I wonder too if that's like our first aspects of seeing energy.
Yeah. Like auras. Think about auras when people see auras.
Auras, even orbs are different colors.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Holy moly.
It's like, down to the root base of it, like,
Definitely.
The simplest little things. And we think of the heart chakra life dendro is, green. And it just so happens like the earth around us, when things grow and they flourish, they're green.
Dang, Gwen. Over here blowing minds.
Right?
But yeah, so I think that actually is going to conclude our episode today because we dove into pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about.
With NDEs.
NDEs. I always think they're interesting because of what people are able to bring back from the other side. And like I said, all the books that I mentioned here, I will definitely link them for you guys if you guys want to purchase them or where to find them. So if you're reading this, you're like, I would like to read more about this person's story in particular. I'll have it in the episode description. Going back to the idea of why we are even talking about NDEs is I think it's important because essentially, for the most part, a lot of people, at least I do, when I go to spots or when I know somebody is behind you don't want to see anybody stuck. And it makes you question like, well, okay, why are you stuck? And it also is a reflection to yourself because you don't want to be stuck. You don't want to be on the other side. And I think nowadays, us learning so much and bringing out all this information, even the works of Dolores Cannon, even the paranormal researchers that are going out and asking questions about like the people that are stuck on the other side and trying to help them cross over. Because I know one of the things that we get all the time for people that are stuck, one of the questions that Mike in particularly likes to ask is like, what does it feel like over there? What is where you are? What does it feel like? And they always say cold and lonely and dark.
Yeah. And
so obviously we don't want to be stuck, as well as, you don't want to see other people be stuck because it's sad. It really is. When you go to a location and it's haunted, it's different when it's residual, but when it's somebody that's stuck that can't get to the other side, it really is sad because you're like, you should be going to that source of, because we know somewhat to a degree it exists. I mean, enough to where people have experienced it and stuff like that. Or you hope that there's a spot that is of divine light and source and stuff like that. But I think it's really important. Like last week we talked about AI, which is about the consciousness. Could AI have a conscious?
Opposite. Here you're talking about like a very human experience.
Yeah. And I think too, NDEs are something that people will not forget. Yeah. I did not forget about the one when I was 5, and I probably won't forget.
Well, yeah, because it's traumatic.
Yeah. And I think it's I don't know. And that's just, a basic one. There's people that have gone through very, very, very traumatic NDEs.
Oh, yeah.
Like Mike's, I mean, that shaped, that totally changed him, seeing his organs washed and clean and then put back inside of him and stuff like that. And I'm sure like there has been nurses and stuff like that that have encountered, because not only have they encountered like positive things, they obviously have had weird stuff too with the other side. And I think that's interesting that too, that near-death experiences also paints the picture that there is a bright side and there is a very negative side as well. Because I think some people like to just say, oh, there's only there's only positive, and then there's some people that only negative. And I think there's definitely a middle. And I think sometimes there's an imbalance. Like sometimes the dark tends to overpower, especially when it's like demonic cases and stuff like that. I think I've talked about this before. I don't think like the dark stuff is your friends. Like some people paint it. Thought it was really important to talk about this because we always talk about like places being haunted and stuff like that, but kind of diving into what us as humans have encountered of the paranormal and on the other side is important as well.
Oh, and an interesting tidbit. I forgot to say this. But earlier, when you were talking about like how people still feel a connection after they go, which it's kind of sad because if you look at most of these stories, most of them are very catered or geared or popularized because a lot of them echo a lot of Christian beliefs. And I feel like it's kind of sad that you don't hear as many stories about like, you know, people that get to experience like pagan gods or like, like how many times do you hear about people going and meeting like Norse gods, you know? Like that would be very cool to talk about, but I feel like some of those stories, they don't get shared as much as they should because they don't.
Yeah, because I will even a popular
belief.
Yeah, and I'll even say like I obviously have found ones that talk about like the light, but because I was specifically looking for like popular ones that you guys could go read about as well, because NDEs are very, very personal.
Oh yeah.
And so the fact that I didn't want to just go on like a Reddit page or a Facebook page and just ask people like, can I share your story? Because I didn't know how that would feel being out there. But these are people that actually wrote books and put their story out there. So yeah, I did not find any about any other gods and stuff like that.
But it's interesting because I can't remember exactly what religion believes it. I want to say Shinto, but I could be wrong. I could very much be wrong. But they actually believe that what we want to identify as a soul, ghosts and experiences, you know, stuff like that with the paranormal are actually the manifestation of our soul's memories. And it's fragments of ourself. Imagine if an NDE, it's because part of your soul is on the other side. And that's why they feel such a strong connection, is it's kind of like part of them is still over there. You know, if we are made up of memories and you have a memory of the other side, does that mean like a piece of you will always be there? You know? Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot to think about.
We got to think too, essentially your energy is always left places. Wouldn't you feel like just thinking of a soul and like the imprints of just everyday life? So could you imagine if you were on the other side and you had imprintation of that? Because you got to think, one of the things I always talk about is like the catalog of energy. Like I feel like having psychic abilities, I am able to read that energy from different things and people.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the main things that a psychic ability has, is that you're able to read energy quick and more so than somebody that maybe isn't as in tuned or whatever. I would think, because like if I go down the street, I can feel the energy of that house or that person or whatever. And could you imagine if I had gone to the other side?
Yeah. And some people even think too that like, back to what I was saying, like, you know, that we're memories and all this and that, you know, certain religions, especially Eastern religions, they believe that like everything, literally like everything has a soul in some way. So, I mean, all this energy that you're feeling all the time, if you go to somewhere that's so far away, you come back, I'm sure you feel so alienated because your energy is so much different than what's around you.
Yeah.
And the souls and like spirits that surround you here. It's probably like a totally different feeling.
Well, you think about it too. majority of people that have had the positive experience, not the negative, but the positive has said that it was so grand and so great you don't want to go back. Like you don't want to go back to Earth, right?
It's almost dread when you come back here.
So when you think about it, when you go to a place that's you thought was normal, then you go to a place that's 10 times better and like you literally don't have to pay for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you come back to the place that's not as comfortable. You're like, well, what the heck? Yeah. Like, for instance, you take it as a chair, right? You have your chair. You've grown up with your chair. You like your chair. But then they show you a lazy boy recliner. And you sit in that lazy boy recliner and you're like, this is nice. And they're like, you can have it for free. You can sit in here for 15 minutes. Well, you can't have it for free, but you can sit in here for 15 minutes. And you can watch whatever TV show you want. You can take it and relax, right? But then they're like, but 15 minutes are up. You have to go back to your chair. It doesn't feel the same.
And something that you thought was, because I mean, these people, it's not like all these people who have NDEs lead some like, they kind of make it out, like I said, like how we're talking about like glamorize it, like, oh, they were leading such horrible trauma-filled lives and one day it was all better. Some of these people had great lives and were just living and they loved their life. And not all of them are like, you know, deep in this, you know. Even then, if they have a great life here, they have loved ones that they love. Even when they experience like a little bit of, you know, being over there, they don't want to come back.
Yeah.
So it's very deep. It's very deep talk.
And definitely NDEs are very personal, intense. So anybody who's listening that has had an NDE, I feel you. It's not a light experience. It's not something you want to experience. You know,
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't even fully there and I was like, whoa, what the heck? But yeah, so that pretty much concludes our episode. So I didn't say it at the beginning like I wanted to, but like I said, I have my sister Gwen here, so I'm going to take full advantage of that. And there is an episode coming after this one. You can see it. It's going to be released the same day. I just didn't want to drown this episode down with a bunch of Gwen's experience. Not drown, I shouldn't say that, but like
drown.
Yeah, wow. Sorry. But like anybody that wanted to hear specifically about NDEs, I didn't want them. I don't want to hear about your sister's experiences. I want to hear about NDEs. So we have NDEs, but then we have a bonus episode coming the same time as this one. It is going to be after. So you'll see this one and then you'll see Gwen's experiences. And she's going to talk about her experiences, some crazy stuff that she experienced at some of the places that I've talked about, houses we lived in, stuff about our family, and having
it's like our silly little episode.
Yeah, it's very, very free flowing. So if you like
fun.
if you like more of the
alien probing,
oh my gosh, if you like more of the like more just conversational based and not structure based episodes, definitely listen to that one. It's not as serious and not as intense, not as informational based either. Yeah. It's just more experience.
Us talking.
So, yeah. So it's a good episode. Go check it out. We actually recorded it before this one. So, but if you want to check us out on social media, our Instagram is at Hidden in the Shadows. Our Twitter is at Hidden in the Shaw 6. Our TikTok is at Hidden in the Shadows Podcast 2. I don't know who has Podcast 1. Me and Isaac always ponder that idea, and we don't know who it is. One of these days, I'm going to message Podcast 1 and be like, hey, what's up? Why do you have Hidden in the Shadows Podcast 1? Facebook, Hidden in the Shadows Podcast. You can also find links to everything at hiddenintheshadowspodcast.com. Yeah, so we'll catch you. Oh, next week, real quick. Next week's episode is going to be with Isaac, and we're going to be talking about the Winchester Mystery House, which is one of those well-known spots. It's located in San Jose, California. It's a sprawling mansion that was built by the widow of a firearms magnate, William Wright Winchester. Definitely got some weird stuff going on, bizarre architectural features, staircases that lead to nowhere, doors that open into blank walls. Oh. Yeah, very interesting. A lot of a lot of people, well-known investigators have investigated their ghost adventures, paranormal state, ghost hunters. So yeah, we'll be talking about all of that. So yeah, we'll catch you weirdos in the next one.